Hey guys, welcome back to Halloween November. Yeah, I didn't really get to release any of the content that I wanted to around Halloween, so I've decided to basically turn November into one whole long month of Halloween-styled content, starting out with today's incredibly spicy video. Some insane new flood content that released the other day. A short story called Saturn Devouring His Son. The story of the first ever Spartan to be infected by the flood in Halo lore. Now, this story, as you can imagine, is a huge deal, but before we even get to the story itself, we need to break down its title. Saturn Devouring His Son is an infamously haunting painting done by Spanish romanticist Francisco Goya in the mid-19th century. The painting is widely regarded as the most disturbing piece of art in human history, depicting the actions of the Titan Cronus in Greek mythology, or, as he was known to the Romans, Saturn. After usurping his father, a prophecy was foretold by Gaia, the humanization of Earth in Greek mythology, that one of Saturn's sons would eventually usurp him as he had done to his father. And so, as the painting depicts, whenever his queen would give birth to a child, Saturn would devour it. Now, the painting itself is incredibly haunting. The gore is horrifyingly well depicted, and Saturn's facial expression is, well, just one of pure insanity. I mean, look at those eyes. But what's arguably even more haunting are the details that surround the painting. Goya's motivations and his mental state during its creation. Saturn Devouring His Son is a part of a unique collection of paintings by Goya called the Black Paintings. Paintings created without commission, not on tapestry or canvas, but on the walls of his own house, the Villa of the Deaf Man. Paintings that Goya never intended for anyone else to see. Early on in his life, Goya painted pretty bright, positive-looking paintings, but after contracting a mystery illness in 1795, he became deaf, and instantly his paintings took a more deranged turn, culminating in the Black Pictures, and the most disturbing work of art in human history. One that Goya himself didn't even name because it wasn't created for anybody else to see. It was created for him to transpose his disturbed mental state and thoughts about the, then in his eyes, failing, disease and war-riddled country of Spain into art form, and the result was something horrific. But what relevance does the painting have to the story besides, of course, it being named after it? Well, Saturn to me represents the Flood, a once ruling dominant force, and his son represents humanity, in this case, the Spartans, ultimately children of its own creation, seeking to stamp down and eradicate its father. That's the kind of metaphorical link. The obvious link is the, whole devouring part. Ultimately, I think this is such a cool parallel to draw, especially for this story, because not just the painting itself, but also all the surrounding details share that same level of bleakness and disturbia as the Flood. So, the story takes place in the year 2556, which is 4 years prior to Halo Infinite, and only a year after Hunters in the Dark, in which the Ark's monitor, the now dead 000 Tragic Solitude, opened the portal back to Earth and wreaked havoc on the planet and also its entire defense fleet to harvest materials to repair the Ark. In the wake of the destruction of Earth's defense fleet, the UNSC placed great importance on partnerships between private corporations to aid in the reconstruction of these destroyed fleets. Enter today's partnership between Imbrium Machine Complex, who are responsible for the creation of a number of Gen 2 and Gen 3 Mjolnir armor sets, and the BXR Mining Corporation. The two joined forces to establish a survey and mining operation on a gas giant's asteroid belt in the Mars system, within which was a planetoid named LV-31, or LV for short, in which the corporations set up their habitat. Enter Julian Donny, an ex-Marine who joined the Corps pretty late in the war, but didn't want to serve in the UNSC anymore now that the Covenant were history. It was never Julian's calling. Instead, he wanted to find some sort of autonomy in his own life, and so he signed a survey and securities contract with IMC, his prior experience making him right at home in a job that had potentially hazardous assignments like the one he was about to embark on. Speaking with Abe, a seasoned veteran of IMC's Hazmat Corps, as the two geared up in their osteo suits before embarking on the assignment, Abe says that the assignment pertains to a discovery of dramatic proportions. One of BXR's scans had discovered a repository of refined foreigner alloy deep within Site 22, a mining site on one of the Belt's asteroids. If recovered, this dig could reap retirement-level rewards for Julian, Abe, and the crew. Mox, another veteran of the IMC who had been with the corporation for well over a decade at this point, came in and revealed more about the repository. It wasn't just some inert cache of alloy, the repository was a whole damn foreigner ship. All of a sudden, Julian understood why IMC were deploying several hazmat squads to the site. Who knows what lurked within? Mox, Abe, and Julian made their final equipment checks and also made sure that they were subscribed to HiddenXperia, as you should, right now, hit that big red button before departing LV aboard an IMC Pelican to the surface of Site 22.
Silence, cold, empty, hunger, dark, barrier, hunger, time, silence, hunger, trapped.
On their way to the surface, Julian blasts the latest track by band Errant V down his audio channel, a band that he can't wait to see live once the mission is over. How very combat evolved. As the Pelican touches down and the troop bay opens, the team are presented with a glittering starfield punctuated by the gas giant's bright blue hue and the grey-brown surface of the asteroid. Welcome to Site 22. BXR's EM-120 augers, heavy yet delicate deep mining tools, littered the landscape of the asteroid, but all within half a kilometre of Site 22 had been shut off. Julian, Abe, and Mox rendezvous with engineers at the mouth of a small cave, carved by the augers, which leads down to the repository. The engineers state that they have no idea how the ship became wrapped in the rock of the asteroid, but at the end of the day, the why didn't matter to them, neither did the what. All that mattered was how they planned on getting it out. As they discussed the how, Julian began feeling an immense sense of curiosity as he stared down the mouth of the cave, but his longing gaze was interrupted by Abe, asking Mox what the plan was. BXR were to re-establish a perimeter around the site and recalibrate their equipment to bust the ship open. Mox assigned the IMC hazmat crew their positions. Lance and West, position 1. Beck and Artie, position 2. Louisa and Oswald, position 3, and Abe and Julian, position 4. T-minus 5 minutes until they started knocking.
Sound, light, sound, hunger, movement, closer, closer. Armored casket, hunger, sound, light, freedom, food, weave, circuit, command, open, food.
An hour into BXR's attempt at unsealing the ship with their augers, and very little had changed. With the team's collective patience running dry, Mox ordered Beck and Artie off position 2 and Abe and Julian off position 4 to check their hazmat suits' heat seals and descend into the cave opening to get a closer look at the vessel themselves. The ship was only a dozen meters in, and the cave was still emanating the blatant heat of the auger's beams, but Julian spotted some kind of shimmer, something strange happening to the target's alloy surface, almost as if it was rippling like a liquid or some sort of metallic skin. He looked back at Abe, asking if he saw the same thing, but Abe's eyes were wide and fixed on the same spot.
What in the actual?
Artie was picking up the ripple too. 9 distinct points in the alloy, rippling, and as Mox reached their position, the silvery surface of the foreigner vessel began to peel away along a fresh seam, as if the top layer was being pulled back like armoured curtains, revealing an opening to its enigmatic interior, enamoring the team who were dreaming of their payday. Mox radioed the remainder of IMC's hazmat team to rendezvous for the initial clearance sweep, but Julian's emotion suddenly turned from one of awe and curiosity to uncertainty. He questioned Mox's decision, but they overruled it and ordered the team in. Payday was assured. Speaking of payday, this video is sponsored by Enlisted, a new kind of FPS that blends PvP and PvE combat across multiple historical campaigns, all with their own unique weapons, vehicles, and equipment, from 1941 Moscow to 1945 Berlin, where you take command of a squad of customizable AI soldiers in massive battles with hundreds of targets, led by other players. And it's free to play right now on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation. Enlisted is accessible for any kind of player thanks to its more realistic movement and target-rich environment, so no matter your skill set, you can still play an important role on the battlefield. But it's also hardcore when it needs to be. Inventory time to kill is realistically short, and vehicles have realistic damage models, making their combat intense, strategic, and rewarding. Personally, I'm a huge gun guy, so the sheer volume of weapons available at your disposal in Enlisted really flicks my switches. I can absolutely recommend it to any weapons connoisseurs, especially World War II weapons connoisseurs. So go play Enlisted right now for free on PC, Xbox, or PlayStation using my link in the description. You'll even get a free bonus pack for using said link, which comes with multiple weapons, soldiers, and a premium account. We then switch perspective to the ready room of the Paris-class UNSC Saturn, where Francisco Goya's Saturn devouring his son watches over the room from behind its protective container. The last of Goya's deeply disturbing yet infamous black paintings, now residing within a frigate named after it. The Saturn's captain, Pedro Alvarez, stands before the painting, admiring its horrifying beauty, where he's interrupted by a Lieutenant Shafiq.
I always thought he swallowed them whole.
Alvarez doesn't turn from the painting, but replies,
That is what the myth tells us, but Goya saw the horror of the act in quite a different way. In his interpretation, they were devoured, bit by bit. Of course, we are looking at it far removed from its original context regarding the political upheaval in Goya's time. The French Revolution, the Peninsular War, the Inquisition, all fascinating areas of Earth's history that, in some ways, resemble our own recent...
The two are interrupted by an alert broadcast across the ship, and they rush to the bridge, where the Saturn's shipboard AI was waiting for them. Lycaon, an AI taking the image of a man in a white gold toga, with the head of a wolf.
Garbled distress messages from Site 22, Captain. Contact with the on-site team has been lost.
Cavern, cold, wet, dragging, food, screams, hunger, feast.
Back down at Site 22, Mox's initial clearance sweep had yielded some demonic results. Screams. Vacillating, ever-present, skin-peeling screams. Whether they came from the mouth or the mind, Julian wasn't sure, neither did he care. He wasn't able to tell what was reality anymore. He tried recollecting what had happened to anchor his thoughts in reality. Shortly after Mox and the initial team had entered the ship, their reports turned unintelligible, chopped, terrified. Hazmat officers Beck and Artie had barely set foot inside the vessel before Mox came sprinting back out at them from the ship's interior, but it wasn't Mox, not anymore, and they weren't the only one. Site 22 was rapidly engulfed in chaos and violence. The poor, unarmed miners and civilian contractors just trying to earn an honest living in the harsh post-war galaxy were now trying to fight off an unknowable horror with nothing but construction tools. Julian was faring slightly better thanks to his limited military training, but the more he fought this horrific entity, the more he questioned whether he even wanted to survive it.
What the hell is going on down there? Can you clean up the distress message? Attempting to now, sir.
What played back to Alvarez and Shafiq was garbled static mixed with irregular sounds of small arms fire and multiple voices, all shouting at once. But after 36 seconds, The audio fell silent, leaving nothing but static. Lycaon brought up Site 22's security camera feeds, and the bridge collectively stared at the low-resolution image of the cave opening. At first, it was empty, but then the camera locked onto an irregular and shadowy shape. A dark trail smudged the ground behind it, and there appeared to be another figure wriggling and flailing like a fish out of water. As the security camera's resolution improved, Lycaon locked and looped the footage, but by the time the image cleared up, both figures had vanished into the mouth of the cave. But at this point, the bridge crew knew what they'd just seen. They let out a collective horrified inhale, knowing that they had just set eyes on the nightmare that had haunted the minds of Navy corpsmen in the final days of the war, like a dark sailor myth of old. Site 22 had been consumed by a timeless creature, one that knew how to wait and how to win. The Flood.
Rules of engagement are clear in the event of an incursion such as this, sir. Emergency contact protocol Upsilon must be implemented to withdraw all groundside units and limit the spread of the parasite.
Alvarez appeared shocked at Lycaon's suggestion. The only personnel on the ground were unarmed civilian miners. He was confident that the Saturn's troop complement would very easily take care of this minor inconvenience. And so, Spartan Fireteam Leviathan were deployed, but Lycaon growled back.
Need I remind you, sir, that if even one of the Spartans is compromised by the Flood, use of Mac rounds and fusion warheads is authorized to sterilize the area.
But Alvarez was not having any of it. He wasn't willing to sacrifice that lucrative alloy repository for anything. And so, once again, he ordered Leviathan to deploy. But as he did, Lycaon once again interrupted.
I am sorry, sir, but in the event of a Flood outbreak, protocol supersedes your command per UNSC Regulation 14-37201. If you are unwilling to comply, I am authorized to remove you from...
Lycaon went silent, his hologram still active but clearly disabled as Alvarez uttered the AI's override code freeze. With the AI's ridiculous words of caution now out of the picture, the captain glanced around the bridge to a mix of expressions from his crew.
Bring all stations to alert. I want a Hazard group deployed to support Leviathan. Make ready to form a defensive perimeter and hold the line.
The bridge crew didn't immediately respond, all equally stunned from what they'd witnessed on the camera feed and for how brazenly their captain had disregarded their AI's words of caution. Tension hung in the air, but Lieutenant Shafiq was the first to break it, and the rest followed suit, returning to their stations. As Alvarez sunk back into his command chair, his mind lingered on the image of the combat form dragging its helpless victim into the darkness of the cave. He felt the eyes of Saturn on his back, glaring at him with those wide, opalescent eyes, caught in his act of barbarism.
They were devoured, bit by bit.
Locked in a state of mental disarray, Julian was still not sure whether he had been infected yet, but as the UNSC reinforcements came crashing down to Site 22, as if they were dropping in behind Covenant lines, his memories started to scramble. He spotted a squadron of Cyclops exosuits and teams of Hellbringer flamethrower units as they began torching the area indiscriminately, with no regard for whether their target was human or infected, alive or dead, just burning everything in their sight to deny the Flood any potential hosts. Thanks to the magnitude of the discovery at Site 22, a larger than usual contingent of staff had been assigned there by IMC, which also meant a larger pool of victims for the parasite, most of whom had already succumbed. The 10mm rounds in Julian's sidekick had run dry. All he had left was his laser cutter. What he'd do once its battery ran dry, he didn't know, but that was when he saw them. Myths, legends, Spartans. The chemically and cybernetically augmented super soldiers who had won the Covenant War had finally arrived, and as much as their presence instilled hope in Julian, it also revealed to him the dire enormity of the situation at Site 22. Spartans aren't deployed to scenarios where normal, everyday people like him were even remotely expected to survive. As the battle raged on, the heat seals in Julian's hazmat suit kept spiking from the firepower and flame of the Cyclops and Hellbringer units, but for a moment, it seemed as though they might have a chance here. But that was when he saw it. the first Spartan of Containment Fireteam Leviathan fell. As the Spartan was overrun by the parasite, the Mjolnir countermeasures kicked in. The hydrostatic gel layer pressurized to render the suit immobile, followed by the detonation of a series of micro-explosives within the helmet which shattered the visor and annihilated the Spartan's head. And yet it still wasn't enough. Frozen in fear, Julian watched as the Spartan combat form began tearing apart those its host had once protected. And then it turned towards him, and the retirement grade payday that was at the tip of his fingertips not an hour before left his mind.
Tearing, scratching, kicking, burrowing, breaking, slicing, chest cavity, spine, wrist, devour.
Oh God, get it off me! Get it off me!
Become.
Captain Alvarez watched the outbreak play out before him on the holotable and across the bridge's tactical displays, rigid with horror and denial. His arrogance in overriding Lycaon, sending troops to the surface and deploying Containment Fireteam Leviathan had caused this once small-scale infection to spread out of control, and he knew that the parasite's insatiable hunger meant that his ship was their next target. If the Flood were able to make it aboard the UNSC Saturn, the hollow gaze of Saturn devouring his son would be the last of Alvarez's fears. Not just humanity, but all life in the galaxy was done. And worst of all, it would all be his fault. Captain Pedro Alvarez of the UNSC Saturn would go down in history as the man whose arrogance allowed a flood outbreak to spread across the stars. Were a portrait to be made in the annals of history, he would take the place of Saturn. He no longer cared about rebuilding Earth's home fleet. The horrors of Site-22 were all that mattered anymore.
This is Captain Alvarez of the UNSC Saturn. I am declaring Corruptor and Upsilon protocols. All remaining groundside personnel have 7 minutes to withdraw from Site-22 as the Saturn moves into position, where we will fire our arsenal of Shiva-class nuclear missiles.
Out of shame, regret, and fear, he avoided eye contact with the idle avatar of Lycaon.
Good luck, and Godspeed.
Julian saw the world in a new way, but not Julian. Something different. Something more. His mind fought to be free, to understand, but it also embraced the longing for something else.
Unity.
A gift that he sought to bestow on others. He searched, scoured the surface of the asteroid, sifting through bone and body at a rapid pace, looking for someone to share his new mind with.
Ah, there's one. Abe. Devour. Deluge. Unity.
Peace. We hunger. We find. We envelop. Searching. Seeking. More.
As he began to open his friend's mind, the horizon began to glow. From the bridge of the UNSC Saturn, Captain Alvarez gazed at what was once Site-22, still engulfed in fire. Only a handful of dropships had managed to return from the surface. The others had been annihilated by the nuclear fire of the Saturn's Shiva salvo, which, given the circumstances, was considered a mercy. It quickly dawned on Alvarez that his twilight years of service had been reduced to a brazen failure, one that he knew was going to lead to a court-martialing. He knew that UNSC Tex would eventually be able to restore Lycaon's functionality, revealing his blatant disregard for protocol and subversion of Upsilon and Corruptor. In a state of raw panic, desperate options ran through the captain's mind. Maybe he could initiate Lycaon's final dispensation and order his crew to flee with him across the stars. Or maybe he'd just have to face the trial that awaited him back home and bear the consequences of his actions. He gave command of the bridge to his executive officer, and quietly snaked off to his private quarters, where a bottle of Titan Smoke whiskey lay waiting for him. Once intended to be cracked open as a reward for securing the repository, the bottle was now a coping mechanism. Perhaps he'd come to a final decision about his future at the bottom of a very, very large glass.
Weapon, sharp, cut, hunger, become more.
Make it stop. Please make it stop.
Memories, training, hunger, weapon, fire, kneecap, fall, devour.
Help me. So sorry. Please. Tearing me apart.
Others, feeding, eating, horizon, fire, death. A sheep, condor, approach, swarm, hunger.
Won't let you. Won't let you. Won't let you.
Charging, sprinting, slicing, food, leave behind, condor,
Won't.
abort,
Let.
devour, depart,
You.
become.
So, that is Saturn devouring his son, the story of the first Spartan, or I guess I should say Spartans plural, to ever be infected by the Flood. Flood Containment Spartan Fire Team Leviathan are the first Spartans in the entirety of Halo lore, at least to our knowledge, to ever fall to the parasite, and I gotta say, not only did I absolutely love this story and the way it was written, but I also just loved its ties to the painting as well. That is such a cool, tiptoe into reality. But we aren't done yet. We've got some theorizing to do, my friends. Firstly, what the hell actually was that ship that contained the Flood? All the humans seemed adamant that that ship was Foreigner. I mean, IMC scans even confirmed it, so maybe it was some sort of mobile Flood containment facility, but the description for how its door opened sounded really strange to me. It didn't sound Foreigner at all. Maybe the ship itself had been consumed by the Flood and it was a kind of biomass alloy hybrid that formed on the outer layer that, as it said in the story, opened like curtains, but to be honest, that description, to me at least, sounded really, really similar to the precursor nanodust that the Arbiter ran into in Halo Outcasts. So, maybe that ship wasn't actually carrying the Flood, but rather was one of the ships that carried the precursor dust which caused the Flood in the first place. Honestly, probably not. It's probably just a ship that had some Flood in it, but it's definitely an interesting thing to ponder given how non-Foreigner and even non-Flood the way the ship actually opened sounded. Secondly, there was some dialogue from some kind of Flood entity in this story before any human ever got infected. Now, my mind, and I'm sure many of yours, instantly raced to this meaning that there was a Gravemind or some kind of central Flood intelligence present in the ship, because, as we know, for the Flood to actually gain sentience almost, and in particular a voice, and then also regain the Primordials consciousness, there needs to be a Gravemind, which of course implies that within the ship there had to have been some kind of central intelligence. However, to play devil's advocate for a moment, the Flood entity speaks in a very primal manner. It doesn't speak anywhere near as intelligently as a Gravemind does. So my theory here is that this entity that speaks is sort of a primordial form of Flood consciousness, one that precedes the actual Primordials consciousness, so to speak. One that's focused entirely on consuming and spreading. But the biggest question pertains to the ending.
A sheep, condor, leave behind, condor,
Won't.
abort,
Let.
devour, depart, you become.
This is chronologically set after the UNSC Saturn unleashes its entire nuclear salvo on Site 22 and levels the whole thing, which implies, of course, that some Flood managed to commandeer a Condor and escape the Corruptor Protocol. My friends, Condors are slip space capable. Now, this story takes place in 2556, which is, like I said, 4 years before Infinite, and clearly the galaxy is not consumed by the Flood in Infinite. However, Condors aren't frigates. They can only hold so many infected, and even in the feral stage, the Flood is far from stupid. It's not a dumb entity. So, my theory here is that this Condor, basically, when it got infected, dipped from the Marseille system, using its FTL drive, to some distant, quiet system to spread unnoticed, almost in a way like how when the Flood returned during the Forerunner Flood War, when it landed on Seaward, that was a very distant and very lacking in communications colony. It spread quietly in the corners of the galaxy before returning to consume the rest of it. And you know, that seems kind of a fitting way for the Precursor's final test to begin, just as it did for the Foreigners. Either way, whether that's the case or not, somewhere out there in the distant galaxy, there's a ship that is FTL capable that can jump through slip space that is harboring the Flood. I guarantee that is a plot thread that gets picked up again at some point. That is not the last we're hearing of that. But what do you think? Leave your thoughts on the story and also that slightly cliffhanger ending down in the comments below. Good lord, my friends. It feels so good to be covering New Flood lore again. It's literally been half a decade since we had anything like this, so man, it feels good. Don't forget to go and download Enlisted now using my link in the description and claim your free bonus pack, which features a premium account, soldiers, and multiple weapons. So I want to give a massive thank you to both Frostwolf and Grafton for becoming new Primordials over on Patreon. My friends, thank you very much. What a fitting time for you to ascend to Precursor Godhood. My god, it's almost as if living time and neural physics itself made that happen. I'll let you all ponder on that one. And of course, thank you to all of my usual patrons as well. I really appreciate it. And thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate you all. And I'll catch you all in the next one.